Hello. Welcome to another episode of TalkNL. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Another chilly Wednesday evening here in Newfoundland and Labrador, at least in most places, but at least I think a lot of people have experienced the rain has stopped, and that's a good thing. But definitely better times ahead, I'm sure, as we get further into spring and summer. As you probably know, if you don't, my name is Rudy Norman, and I am joined this evening once again by my trusty sidekick. Do you get offended that I call you my trusty sidekick?
Not at all. I've been called a lot worse.
You've been called a lot worse, I'm sure. Mr. Graydon Pelley, how's it going today, sir?
Going really well, Rudy. Had a great day here on the West Coast. I had my students outside this afternoon in T-shirts, and had a great time outside enjoying the outdoors and the fresh air. And I got my COVID-19 vaccine today.
That's the big news today. I don't know if that's a good thing, Graydon, because that says how old you are. But anyways, at least you got your first jab, so you're feeling good.
Absolutely, quite pleased, and so glad that Western Health included me in this important process today. And
For sure.
It's all about looking after family, friends, colleagues, and yourself.
Yeah, and hopefully, as we continue on, the vaccine rollout will continue to be successful. I think we got the announcement today, or in the last couple of days, that we've surpassed 100,000 COVID vaccines now. So, I mean, things are looking up. I mean, it's going to take time, but I'm hopeful at least that within the next couple of months, everybody that's going to want one is going to get one, and that's always a good thing.
Absolutely.
So, Graydon, we've got a great show this evening. So this came out. If any of you tuned into our episode last week, we had a really interesting conversation through the comments. Our guest this evening was weighing in on the conversation, and so we basically said on air, let's get you on, and he agreed, and we're very thankful and appreciative of him showing up this evening, Mr. Paul Lane, MHA for Mount Pearl Southlands. How are you?
Good evening, guys.
How are you, sir?
I'm wonderful. Glad to be here as always.
That's great. That's good. Yeah. So, Paul, I mean, it's very kind of you for you to come on, and we welcome you. Not your first time on the show, so it's good to have you back. So, I mean, first of all, I want to start off. Congratulations, obviously, are in order. You are again the successful candidate or successful MHA for Mount Pearl Southland. So I imagine that must be. Is it a relief, or is it just euphoria? I mean, how are you feeling about it?
Well, I felt cautiously optimistic going into it, but it's always a relief. I mean, you never know. Elections can take on a life of their own. There's no doubt about that. But I pretty much knew when I started knocking on doors, as I always do. I'll take a street in one area, and then I'll switch over to a different part of the district, and I'll go around to 3 or 4 different sections, cross-section of the district. And I was pretty much getting a very strong response and a very similar response in every area I went. So I felt, like I said, I felt confident, but I certainly didn't take it for granted. I never do. And, you certainly can't do it without a great team of volunteers, family, friends, and volunteers behind you. I certainly want to thank them, and certainly want to thank the people of Mount Pearl Southlands for placing their faith in me once again to lead them in the House of Assembly.
Normal campaigns take on a life of their own, Paul, but this one took on 2 or 3 lives, I think, didn't it?
Well, it certainly did, and yeah, there was a lot of unknowns. And to be honest with you, it's funny how it goes because even though, as I said, I was feeling pretty confident based on the responses I was getting at the doors, when it got cut off suddenly, and then we had all these issues of, with the online vote, of trying to get ballots online and by telephone. And then I was getting all these people that were calling me and messaging me saying, Paul, I'm trying to get through on this line. I can't get through. I trying to get through on the computer's crashing, the system is crashing, or I applied for a ballot 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I still haven't got it, or myself and my wife applied for the 2 of ours at the same time. I got mine, she didn't get hers, and on and on and on it went with all these issues. Then you start to perhaps, wonder or second guess and kind of freaks you out a little bit, to be honest with you. So I was very relieved when the numbers came in and it was over with, to be honest with you.
So, I mean, let's kind of dive into that now, Paul, because, I mean, you were on the ground. I mean, you were getting this stuff firsthand. We were kind of hearing rumblings about different things and following stuff through social media. But, I mean, what level of, I'll say, complaints or reports of irregularities or whatever did you feel like? Was it more than you expected? Was it kind of in normal what you feel like? What was it? Was it concerning for you?
Very concerning. I was very shocked, to be honest with you, when it started. It started off with a couple of complaints, and then it seemingly grew and grew and grew. And there were any number of issues that people contacted me about. I'm convinced that there's a lot of people in this province. I know there's people in my district for sure who never did get to vote, who absolutely wanted to vote, who tried to vote. But there were a number of issues that happened there. As I said, there were some people who, for example, who applied for ballots, who tried to get a ballot over a computer and phone lines and so on. And there was a number of occasions where the Elections NL computer system crashed. And there was a number of occasions, as I understand it, where the phone lines crashed, and then they had to bring in the federal counterparts in to assist. But there were some people, because of that, they tried 2 or 3 times, and then they got frustrated and basically said, well, shag it, I did my part, I tried to vote, and if it's this difficult, I'm not going to bother. So I know there was some of that definitely happened. Yeah. There was other people who, for example, as I said, a husband and wife both apply at the same time. The wife gets the ballot, the husband doesn't get the ballot. And when they contact Elections NL to say, and this was like sort of like after the deadline to apply for the ballot, and they applied within the time, but they never got it. So then the time had expired. So then they went back and said, listen, myself and my wife applied for a ballot 3 weeks ago. My wife got hers. I didn't get mine. I want my ballot. And then they would go back and say, boy, we don't have any record of you applying for a ballot. Wow. Well, I definitely did. We both did it at the same time. She put in my name, she put in her name, type of thing. Yeah. She got hers, I didn't get mine. Well, I'm sorry. We have no record of you applying. You're not going to get a ballot. There was people who had ballots that were sent to the wrong address. We seen a story in, I think, CBC where a woman got 3 ballots, all to 3 former addresses, and never did get a ballot to the appropriate address. So, and the list goes on. I know that an hour or so before the deadline to get your ballots in, I know it's fine for Mr. Chalk to say, well, you should have applied earlier and all this kind of stuff. The bottom line is that there were rules in place, and the rules said you could apply for a ballot up until 8 o'clock on whatever that date was. Yeah. And the fact that your computer crashed that shouldn't be, you can't blame that on the voter and said you should have applied last week. Well, maybe that person was a rotational worker just getting home. Maybe that person was working somewhere else. Maybe they got a busy life, whatever the case might be, they applied.
What's the point of having a deadline if you're not going to allow people to vote up to the deadline?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's crazy. So there was people who applied. I know for a fact there were people who applied at the last minute, and the last hour and a half prior to the deadline, going in, and the computer system at Elections NL crashed. And when it finally came up at 8:02, it said the time for voting is over. So they never did get it. It wasn't their fault.
But there were people at 9:30 on the telephone with the Elections NL still getting their information put in and applying for ballots, and they were accepted.
Well, that's the disturbing part. Now, that's not something that I was aware of until it came out recently through, I guess, the court challenge with the NDP and so on. But yeah, there's people allegedly now who applied for who were allowed to vote by phone. There's allegations that there's people who went in and actually voted in person at elections NL. I believe I also heard, which if you can believe this, that there were people who were actually permitted to print their own ballot on their own computer and send it in, or to print the labels for their envelopes and stuff at home and send them in. There's allegations of Elections Newfoundland, Labrador staff taking ballot boxes to their home and counting ballots and sorting through the stuff at home. I mean, the list goes on. It's absolutely, I mean, it's a farce.
So Paul, I mean, the election is done now. We can talk about a bad election and it shouldn't have been called or whatever. But let's look at it this way. Now, nobody doubted that Paul Lane was going to be reelected in Mount Pearl Southlands. I don't think for a minute anybody thought that you were going to lose this election, whether it was a regular election or election like we had.
To be fair, his opponents probably did think he was going to lose, but
no, I don't think so. If they looked at really the thing anyway, that's the way it is. But yeah. Paul, all of that aside, now with the election done, you're a successful candidate. You're elected MHA Mount Pearl Southlands again. Do you consider this a legitimate election?
Legitimate is a very strong word.
Think about 48%
yes,
turnout and 23.16% of the eligible voters elected a majority government.
Yeah, I understand. I think the election was definitely riddled with problems, riddled with issues. I have huge concerns with the election. I don't know if illegitimate is the right word. Perhaps it is. I can only say that.
What word would you use?
I can only say that from my point of view, regardless of the results in my district, which I was very happy with, I believe that there were major issues, and I believe that Mr. Chalk has to be held accountable for it.
Is it so? What word would you use basically? If it's illegitimate is too strong a word. I mean, what do we say? Because to me, it was bordering on an illegal election, because a lot of the things that were
perhaps
done,
illegal, yeah.
Yeah, because, a lot of things that were done weren't done in the realm of legislation. And a lot of that was because we don't have a strong Elections Act. And I mean, a lot was said on that. However, whether it's a strong Elections Act or not, we still have to follow it. I mean, we can't go, and that was my biggest thing here. Like, a lot of things were done, basically what seemed to be on Bruce Chalk's whims. He decided that he would change the voting deadline. He changed that deadline. We would as a party, we were privy to some of the emails that were sent out to updates and stuff. And, things that were asked, can we do this? Can we do that? And he will come back and say, yes, I will allow that. I mean, who is he? He's not a kingmaker. He's the chief electoral officer. So in my regard, like, a lot of things he did, I don't know what grounds he used to make some of the decisions that he made.
Bottom line is that he was ill prepared for the election.
By his own admission.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. Well, like, the bottom line. Look, when Mr. Chalk was asked originally, he said, "I'm ready for a pandemic election." That's what he said, and I have no doubt that he was ready from the pandemic election, from the point of view that there would be in-person voting, and that he was ready in that. We got lots of hand sanitizer at the door. Everyone's going to have their own separate pencil. We're going to put X's on the floors for people to stand to be socially distant. Yeah. People are going to have to wear a mask. Our staff will wear masks, and so on. So he was ready for an in-person pandemic election, but he was not ready to go from an in-person election to a mail-in ballot election. That is very, very, very obvious. And there's no doubt that when it happened, being ill-prepared, he was flying by the seam of his pants and seemingly making up the rules as he was going. If there was nothing to fit the rules, he basically used, maybe he'll say, I used my discretion. But when you're talking about something like people's democratic right to vote, which is governed by legislation, I don't think we can just simply say that he can just on a whim just make these decisions that are going to potentially fly in the face of democracy and open itself up for legal challenges and everything else.
What about the fact now that, okay, so it came to the point where they said that the election could not be done in person. So what about the fact now, because you said Mr. Chalk has to be held accountable and he has to answer to it, but what about the fact that of the letter that was released recently through an ATIP request that Mr. Chalk told the Premier now that we have to go to in-person vote or online mail-in voting? He said we don't have time to do what we need to do, and the Premier still said we're going with the election anyway.
Well, that speaks to irresponsible decision-making on the Premier's part. But at the end of the day, whether we had what we're talking about is going from a 4-week election to a 5-week election. I think we actually went, 8 or 9 weeks or whatever it was. Yeah. So whether it was 4 or 5 wouldn't have really made any difference because we went, like I say, about 8 or 9 weeks and we still had a mess. So I don't think it would have made a difference, but it does speak to the fact that the Premier had one thing on his mind, and that was, let's get this election, no matter what, let's ram it through. I'm looking good in the polls, and let's get this through, get my majority and move on, and roll the dice on anything that may happen in the interim. That's my personal take on what happened there.
And that's just a continuation of what went on here in the by-election that we had here in the Umber Grossmore district. Recent reports say that 9% of ballots that were, supposed to be sent in by mail and stuff were never ever received by Elections NL because of the shortness of the election.
Yeah, no doubt. And there's no doubt in my mind there's thousands of people who were denied their right to vote in this election, which is absolutely scandalous and never, ever should have happened. And to be honest with you, in many ways, I'm glad to see Ms. Coffin challenge this, particularly, when you look at districts that people only won by a very small margin, that you could argue that had everyone had that right to vote, the election, the results could have been different. Now, at the end of the day, I really don't want to be into another election and do this all over again. There's an awful lot of time and work and money and everything else involved. But if I have to do it again, if that should be the result of all this, and I have to do it again in the name of democracy, then I'm certainly more than willing to do so. But
so that takes us into a question that somebody asked, Paul, and I know you can't speak for other independent members. You can only speak for yourself. And the question is by Sterling. He said, is the NL Alliance and the other independent members going to back the NDP with their court case against this election? What do you feel?
Well, I can only say this, and I would put this offer out there. I do not on a personal level, I don't have a party or anything behind me. I'm not independently wealthy, and that I don't have the wherewithal to go challenging things in the courts in that regard. But I would say this, that I certainly have numerous concerns that were brought to me, emails that were sent to Mr. Chalk about those concerns, and I'm more than willing to share and cooperate and share any of that with the NDP or anyone who's challenging this, because there's a difference between, we have to look at what's right and what's wrong, and there were so many things done wrong here, and so I'd certainly be willing to cooperate, if you will, and share any information I have, and even be a witness, so to speak, if that was required or they wanted me to do so.
Yeah, and I think NL Alliance would be on the same page as you are with that. I certainly believe that these people have every right to challenge this and to challenge it on the basis of all of the inaccuracies and the inconsistencies and the things that went on. And personally, for me, from my perspective, I will do anything that I could do to help these people make sure their concerns are heard and dealt with.
Yes, yeah, and agreed, and me too. By the way, guys, you see that it's kind of darkness behind me here now. I'm actually in my office at the Confederation building, and the whole building is on timers. So the lights just go out. So as long as you can see me, I'll continue on. But that's why the lights just went out.
So are the lights going to come back on, or are they done for the night?
They're probably done for the night in certain parts of the building, right? They're all on timers. Yeah.
Very good. Very good.
Trying to save a few dollars for the taxpayers.
Well, I was just going to say it's nice to see we got some semblance of a money saving situation there.
I tell you,
you don't see it very often.
that's gonna come in handy. Everyone's gonna want that when Muskrat Falls comes on stream. But anyways, I wanted to bring this up. So I mean, we see here now the breaking news earlier today from Don Bradshaw. So looks like Sheila Fitzgerald, who ran for the Progressive Conservative Party, she's going to be challenging the election. The results, I guess she's asking that the Supreme Court look at the void the election. It says we heard earlier this week that Jim Lester is going to be challenging. Of course, we have the NDP that are bringing their case to court, and the Progressive Conservatives. They actually said that they're not going to challenge it as a party. They're going to kind of stay out of it, and I guess let everybody else do the battle. So, I mean, Paul, going back, I know Sterling asked the question, but do you feel that these people have a legitimate case to, void the election because of impropriety or of irregularities or illegalities or whatever they can find?
Well, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I will say this. And I'm kind of, this is my feelings on it, and I kind of got it that sort of affirmed. I was listening to, what was it? I'm not sure if it was the morning show or if it was, Linda Swain this afternoon with, what's it called? On
Target.
On Target, there you go. And she had Duff Conacher, I believe his name is, with Democracy Watch.
Yeah.
And what he was saying, and that was kind of my thoughts as well, is that it would be very difficult, very challenging to overturn an entire election. Mm-hmm. But what he did say was that in districts where the margin of victory was very small, if you could show that there was enough people who didn't vote who normally would have voted. So let's look at historical data, I guess. I think I said to you guys before we came on the air. So I looked at my district in the last election and this election. I don't have the exact number. I never got out of the calculator, but roughly it was 600 votes. There was roughly 600 people who voted in the 2019 election that did not vote in the last election. So in theory, you could argue 600 people didn't vote because of all the irregularities, which may or may not be, totally accurate. Some might have decided not to vote, and there's any number of reasons. But let's say we looked at it and we said, well, there's 600 less voters this time around. So if you only won or you only lost your district by 50 votes, then you could argue, I guess, that based on all the irregularities, people not getting their ballots, particularly if you have a bunch of affidavits, for example, signed by people in your district saying, I intended to vote for this candidate and I tried and I was denied for this reason, then you may have a case to say that we should have a by-election in this district because there was enough people who normally would have voted who didn't vote to make up that difference. Now, if you're in a district where the individual won by 1,500 or 2,000 or 2,500 votes margin, and you look at the difference between this election and the last, you say, well, again, let's say 600 people. Well, if all 600 of them voted for the second place person, the winner still would have won by 1,500 votes. Well, then the chances of overturning it and saying that that would have made a difference is probably a lot lesser chance of that happening. So,
Paul, what do you think? What do you think is the attitude of the people of Newfoundland and Labrador now? For example, we see the challenges that Rudy mentioned earlier. They're all coming from defeated candidates. Okay, so and people can look at them and say, you know, sour grapes, blah blah blah, whatever. If there were some challenges from, say, PC members that were elected, or independent members that were elected, or just imagine some liberal members that were elected, about the irregularities and the number of people, because I'm sure there were liberal candidates that were contacted by people who couldn't get their vote to work and couldn't get the things to work. There had to be. It wasn't just the other parties. So, I mean, do we need successful MHAs to come forward in order to make these challenges legitimate?
Well, I think at the end of the day, Graydon, now we're talking public perception versus court of law, because a judge is going to look at the case. A judge is not going to, I would imagine now, you know, looking at how the courts work and how a judge would work, the judge is not going to look at it and say, well, because this person won the election and they challenged it anyway, I'm going to say that the election was illegitimate. But
it would give it more punch, wouldn't it? It would give the challenges more punch.
I think it would give it more punch in terms of public opinion. But a judge is supposed to be totally neutral. Is not supposed to use any kind of emotion or anything else. They're supposed to look at strictly the facts of the case. So whether it was someone who won the election or someone who lost the election or whatever, the judge is supposed to look at the evidence and say, well, this is what happened. These are all these irregularities and so on. And I have to determine whether I think that would have made a difference and that this person could have lost as a result. You know, the results are skewed because of these irregularities. I really don't think a judge in the court of law is going to be swayed because the person won or they lost. Like I say, in terms of the general public, I'm sure it would carry much more weight with the public. They would say, yeah, this is someone who won, and by God, this person is going to stand on their principles and they're going to take it to court and whatever. And I'm sure they would, you know, feel better about that scenario than someone who lost. No doubt in my mind.
Rudy, got more question along these lines? There's a couple of more things we want to talk to him about for sure.
Yeah, I'm just looking here now, Paul. I am getting at my calculator basically. So I mean, you had 668 fewer votes, but you also had 782 more eligible voters in this election. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about here, and I mean, I can bring up the because we got the official release here now from Elections NL. Was the number of spoiled ballots. So apparently, I mean, there's about 2,793 votes that weren't counted for some reason or another throughout the province, right? So in your district, Paul, and I mean, we're only looking at your district because you know, you're here. So you've got about 66, 67, 69 votes basically that were rejected this time. In the last election, I mean, you only had 20.
Thanks for telling me. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so in the last election, you only had 29, right? Okay. So I mean, so things were a little different this time. So I mean, you had 668 fewer people voted this time. You had 787 more people that could have voted. Yep. And you had about 40 more ballots that were rejected. So I mean, it was obvious that this election was greatly impacted. And I mean, we're only looking at your small district here now, Paul. But I mean, you know, put these numbers out throughout the province, and all of a sudden, I mean, like we're seeing some incredibly low numbers in voter turnout is
no doubt.
great.
I agree.
Yeah, and
I'm not arguing with anything you're saying here. By the way, just to be quite clear, I mean this election was a sham as far as I'm concerned. All the things that we've already talked about that happened, we haven't even talked about the scrutineering side of it because that was another mess.
right.
With when you said to me there was 69 spoiled ballots, I said, "Is that right?" I didn't know. Do you know why? Because I refuse. Because after the first go round of the first box that they open in my district, for me where I could have witnessed it, after the first go round, and once I found out what they were doing, I said, "Forget about it. I'm not participating in this farce." And
so what were they doing? What do you mean? What were they doing?
Well, like normally, if you're going to in a normal election, people come in and vote, and of course you have a scrutineer. So the scrutineer is watching the clerk, if you will, open every single ballot. Like they're watching them open it, and they're saying, "Okay, this one is for this person. Yeah. This is a good ballot. This one's for another. Put this one in this pile. This one in that pile." So they're looking at every ballot to see which ones are considered good, because we were only being shown the rejected ballots.
Right.
But maybe there's something that should have been rejected that wasn't rejected, but you didn't get to see that. And then you didn't get to see the counting of the ballots. So they're counting up the pile and then they're writing it down on their little tally sheet. So how do you know, for argument's sake, that if they counted this box and I had, I don't know, let's say if I had 221, how do I know that they didn't, put it in piles or something and only count 121? Or how do you know that they counted 221, but when they wrote it on the sheet, they accidentally wrote 221 or 321 or whatever the case? There was nobody to actually watch them count the ballots, look at the ballots, and record the ballots. All they did was they said, "These are the ones that we rejected. Look at this. Look at this. You okay? You okay? You okay?" That was it. So that's not a proper. That's not how
it was not. It was not a transparent process by any means. Not
at all. Not at all. And we also got to remember, as I sort of started off with, there's three sides to all this. Okay, there's three angles we have to come at this with to deal with this election. The NDP and now a couple of other candidates are taking on one piece of this, and that's to take it to court. Then the other piece that has to come from this is we have to look at the Elections Act itself to make amendments and changes that would be required. Now, I understand that in Mr. Hogan's mandate letter from the Premier, he's tasked with doing that. We'll see where that goes. Hopefully that'll happen. It'll be done before the next election. But then there's a third piece. And the third piece is that the Chief Electoral Officer is an independent officer of the House of Assembly. He is appointed and approved by the House of Assembly, and he is answerable solely to the House of Assembly. He's not answerable to the clerk. He's not answerable to the government. He is answerable solely to the House of Assembly. In this case, no different than the Auditor General and the Privacy Commissioner and the seniors representative and the child youth advocate. They're all officers of the House. They all report to the House of Assembly. So in this case, the Chief Electoral Officer is also the Commissioner for Legislative Standards. So he has a dual role in that particular office. And that office is so important. It's an independent office. It must have integrity, and we must be able to have confidence in what's happening. I would say that the people now have no confidence. I can tell you I have no confidence. And so the other piece to all this is that this election, we need to have an independent investigation as to what went down. Not just rumor and speculation and stories we're hearing, but we need to confirm whether these things we're hearing about people taking ballot boxes home and people voting over the phone and people voting in person, when they weren't supposed to be, people getting ballots without providing IDs and credentials. We need to find out if all this stuff actually did happen. It has to be investigated. and then the chief electoral officer has to answer for this to the House.
Is there going to be any connect, or is it total disconnect? Is there going to be any connect between what goes on now by the new Minister of Justice and the previously appointed all-party committee on democratic reform?
Well, at this point in time, I don't even know if the all-party committee on democratic reform is going to even exist, because when the House of Assembly shut down, when the government basically prorogued, so went the committee. Now, I have already contacted I was speaking to the Premier's chief of staff, and I'm waiting to hear back. And I've said, like, look, we've got a fair bit of work done behind the scenes. We were ready to actually go public on an aspect of democratic reform that we were going to go public with and get consult with the public and hopefully make some changes. And that was ready to go when the election got called, pretty much. So I've already gone back and said, listen, I hope this is not going to die now. The same, basically everybody that was on the committee were all reelected. We're all still here. Nothing has really changed. We only have, I think, 3 new members. So there's no reason why we can't just continue on as we did. Now,
was Alison Coffin on that committee?
No, Jim Dinn was representing the NDP. Okay. So there's no reason why that can't continue. Now, I think it may require, and this is part of all this, it may require another motion on the floor of the House of Assembly to reestablish it. Because,
good luck with that.
Well, that's if it doesn't happen, I can assure you that that the public will hear loud and clear from me about that one. But I'm really hoping that they're going to agree to do it, and that we can just continue on and pick up where we left off, because we were very close to starting an initiative on one aspect of democratic reform.
Paul, I got 3 little things here I want to throw at you and get your quick response on. I know Rudy got lots of things there. New cabinet, growth of cabinet, and the person elected as Speaker of the House. Any surprises?
Well, I can't say I'm surprised. I can't say I'm really surprised with the cabinet, because I figured John Abbott was going in. I really did figure that John Abbott would probably go in. I was thinking Mr. Hogan as well, where he was a lawyer and so on. But the only thing is that I was also looking at it from a political point of view. Now there's 2 more people in St. John's, and if you take 2 out, then in theory you're going to, if you put 2 in, then in theory you're going to have to take 2 out. And who will that be, and how will that impact things politically, internally, and so on? But in this case, they actually removed 2 members of cabinet, and I'm sure that there will, I'm sure there was disappointment and everything else. So we'll all see how that manifests itself down the road and so on. I mean, I have no idea, but what's happening there. But I suspect they're not happy, obviously. But then at this point in time, when we're going to be going into the House Assembly, we're going to be talking about the Green Report, if we ever do get to see it, and the huge provincial debt and everything that we have, and the need to cut expenses. And now we're adding 2 more cabinet ministers, expanding the cabinet, spending more taxpayers' money. So I was surprised that he would go down that road of, like I say, on the heels of the Green, with the Green Report coming and everything else. I'm surprised he would have went down the road of expanding cabinet and opening himself up for that criticism. And when you look at it, as an example, like, and this is no offense to Miss Howell, I think it's Howell, Northern Peninsula.
Yes,
is that her name? I don't know her. I've never met her. I don't before, so I'm sure I'll get to know her. But when you look at municipal affairs, the environment's part of municipal affairs was removed, and there's a standalone Department of Environment. all of the water, sewer, road work, and all that stuff, all the infrastructure work, is all gone to transportation and works. Fire and emergency services is all gone to justice. So I'm not quite sure, and this again is no offense to Miss Howell, but I'm not even sure what municipal affairs, what her mandate is going to be, what she's going to be doing, because the department has been gutted, quite frankly, and I'm not sure that we need. It almost seems like we were just sort of making a spot for a couple of extra people for whatever reason.
Yeah. So were you surprised with the choice for speaker?
Well,
I was shocked.
Well, no, I wasn't. I thought it was going to be Brian Moore. That's who I figured would be the speaker, would be Brian Moore. But if it wasn't Moore, I thought it would be Derek Bennett. I figured it would be one or the other. And in this case, it went to Derek. I thought it would have went to Brian, but anyway, it is what it is, and I'm sure Derek will do a good job. But no, I mean, I wasn't really shocked by that one at all.
Very good.
Were you?
Yeah, I actually thought Scott Reed was going to be returning as he was going to be Speaker of the House. I thought that's what, because I've been so surprised up to this point, Paul, that Scott Reed has not had a cabinet position. I don't know if he wants one or he don't want one, but I've been surprised about that. Yeah.
Well, it's like anything else, I suppose. Unfortunately, not everybody is going to get a cabinet position, and if somebody goes in, somebody else got to come out, and then I guess you're also into the sort of political piece of it again, which happens all the time. About we got to make sure we got someone on the West Coast, and we got to have someone in Labrador, and someone on the Boot, and so many in St. John's, and so many in Central, and and then there's always the pressure. We got to have so many females in the cabinet, the gender equity and all that stuff. So you're balancing all these things, when in my mind, personally, and this is no offense to anyone or any district, to be honest with you, I don't care if the cabinet is all female, nor do I care if the cabinet is all from one part of the province or the other. I just think we need to have the best people in the cabinet.
Absolutely.
That are capable of doing the job. And
I don't know if we lost Rudy, if he's still there or not, but
no,
he's coming back.
I'm letting you guys have your moment. But yeah, it's all good stuff. I mean, it's very interesting times. So, Paul, you mentioned the Green Report. I mean, I don't know when we're going to be getting it. If we're going to be getting it, what's going to be happening there, but. What are you hearing anything at all? Are you privy to anything that people in the province aren't hearing? And I don't know if you can tell us if you even are, but what's your impressions? What do you think is coming, and what's it going to mean for the province?
Crickets in terms of when it's coming. Haven't heard a sound. I mean, it's anybody's guess what's going to be in that report. I mean, I'm sure, I'm pretty confident that the report is not going to call for additional spending. That's for sure. It's going to be looking at ways to save money and find efficiencies and so on, whatever you want to call it, austerity. Obviously, I would think it'll also look at ways of hopefully growing the economy and creating more revenue. But let's not kid ourselves here. The recommendations are that there's going to be some tough pills to swallow, I suspect, depending on who you are and where you are and, what your particular situation is. I think everybody understands the fact that we're up to our neck in debt and something has to be done. But the problem that you always have, and this is where politics comes into play, and it's reality, it doesn't matter which party is in and which politician it is. At the end of the day, people will say to you, to your face, boy, we got to make changes. We got to cut some expenses. We're living beyond our means. Yeah. Until you say, you know what, you're absolutely right. And therefore, we're going to have to reduce some of the services in your community. And then all of a sudden, poof, she goes up.
Yeah.
10
But
year debt.
Paul, do you get the feeling? Do you get the feeling, and I know people in Newfoundland and Labrador, because I've talked to people and I've thought about it myself, and Rudy and I have talked about it, and so on and so forth. I mean, we all know, Newfoundland and Labrador knows, people know we're in a bad situation. We got to fix it, and there's going to be, like you say, I quote, some hard pills to swallow. But it seems like our premier is trying to give the false impression you got nothing to worry about.
Yeah, and you know, if he's going to take leadership, and actually, you know, he's talking about these bold steps and all this stuff. I mean, his wonderful wording that his communications gurus are coming up from with all this boldness and everything else. But anyway, if he's going to be bold, then you know, there's going to have to be some significant changes, and somebody's going to have something to worry about. I don't know if I'm going to be worry about. I don't know if worry about is the right word, but there's going to be people that are not going to be happy over some of the decisions that are likely going to be made. Will it be the end of the world? No, but it's probably going to be things that some people won't like, I suspect. And it's like anything else. If you eliminate, if you have something today and somebody takes it away from you, no matter what that is, you're probably not going to be happy about it. If a service gets discontinued, and at the end of the day, it means somebody is out of job, well, then that person and their family and their friends are not going to be happy that that happened. If something went to the private sector, as an example, and all of a sudden somebody had a good government job and now is a lower, you know, paying lower wages and not the same benefits or whatever, they're not going to be happy. So, you know, anything you do, whatever route they go to downsize, right size, whatever you want to call it, it's going to have an impact on people. Now, obviously, it has to be done in a way to hopefully have the least amount of impact as possible on people. Hopefully, if it is going to mean reducing positions, that it's going to be done so with attrition, maybe some early retirements, I don't know, things like that, whatever, as opposed to just simply kicking people to the curb. I certainly wouldn't advocate for that.
How can the premier?
Pardon me?
How can the premier look at the people of Newfoundland, or look at the public service, or look at anybody in that matter, and say, look, we have to reduce in your area, but yet I have increased government. I have built government into a bigger entity. I have invested more money into more departments in government, or bigger government. And what kind of thinking was there to say, I'm going to have to go to the people to tighten their belt, but once again, we have increased the size of government. So it's not leading by example. It's do as I say, but not as I do.
Well, you know, I don't mean to be mean now, but you've heard the expression, you can't fix stupid. But I mean, that's a pretty, you know, it's not a very wise decision in my opinion. And perhaps, you know, again, I don't know who's giving the advice, and you know, there could be any other number of issues at play. But to my mind, you do not go into, if you're trying to prepare people for austerity of to some degree, then you don't start off by increasing, as you say, increasing your cabinet, increasing expenses around you and your group, and then go to the people and say, oh, by the way, we're going to have to cut back on these ferry services, or you know, or more schools are going to have to close, or we're shutting down your library, or, you know,
is this another example of too much power in the premier's office?
Well, I mean, to my mind, Graydon, and I mean, maybe I'm living in a fantasy world, right? You know, some people have said I have to some degree, but I look at the model they have in the territories, more of a consensus type government and so on, and without parties and people coming together to actually make the right decisions, the best decisions, and they share in the glory, but they also wear the negativity where there is any. Ultimately, that would be the best system. I mean, if we were really committed, all parties, all MHAs, and I've put it out there numerous times. I'm not trying to put myself now on a pedestal above anybody else. I'm really not. But I have said to the Premier, I have said publicly, I'll say here again now, I understand that there's going to have to be some tough decisions made. And I, as one member, one independent member, I could sit back and let government make all the tough decisions, and I could criticize every single thing they're doing. I could attend every rally, criticize it all, and vote against the budget and vote against everything. But am I really doing what I was elected to do? Am I really serving my province and the people if I were to do that? Wouldn't it be great if all parties could actually get together, work together, and if there are things that have to be done, for the leaders of all the parties to do a joint press conference and say, you know what, we've all gotten together, we've met on this. This is a decision that we all agree has to be made, and we all support it. You and I know that'll never happen. We're dreaming in Technicolor.
Not within the system we have.
Not within the system we have, because it's all about power. Those who have it want to hang on to it. Those who don't have the power, they will do anything they can to hang on to the power. But, I, as one MHA, and I've said this, I am prepared to work with government, regardless. I don't care if it's Liberal, PC, NDP, Green, Alliance. I don't care what it is. I will work with any government to try to get us out of the mess we're in. And I'm prepared to take some flack and support some tough decisions if they have to be made. As long as decisions make sense, they're reasonable, they take into account our most vulnerable people, and they're based on fact. And those those facts are shared with me. That's the other thing. I'm not taking anybody's word for it. I can remember taking somebody's word for it. A fellow by the name of Ed Martin. I can remember him coming into the boardroom and taking his word for it about all these meetings about Muskrat Falls and everything else, and we've seen where that went. So I learned the hard way. And but if you can show me, if you can sit down and show me the facts and why decisions have to be made and the rationale, and it's the right decision and the best we can do with what we got, I'm prepared to work with the government to try to help dig us out of this hole.
Yeah. I want to go to some comments here now, boys, because we are getting a few comments, and we're not looking at them all. Here's a name we probably all know. Andrea says, I think even if Liberal winners came out and said, even though I won, I do agree with this election and had issues, and I will support the major changes needed to be done to update the Elections Act. That would be something positive. So basically, I mean, Paul, I commend you for this, because you are the only elected MHA, to be honest with you, that I've heard of that has come out thus far, other than the empty platitudes. I mean, the Premier said we need to look at the Elections Act and on and on and on. At least he's acknowledged that. But I mean, they haven't gone too far to the point where you've gone and to say that, I have major issues with this. There are irregularities. There are things that we need to look at, and that, things happened that shouldn't have happened. No other MHA has come out, and to be honest with you, I don't think any other Liberal candidate has come out and said anything like that. So, I mean, I assume they're silenced. I guess they don't want to shoot themselves in the foot because they are resting on a majority now, and they don't want to jeopardize that.
Yeah, perhaps so. I will say, I will say that pretty much everything I've said here and issues I will be bringing up in the House Assembly around all of this, I can say with certainty that my colleague Eddie Joyce will be sharing in that, and he likewise has major issues with what went on. Yeah. And so I will say that. I haven't really had any big discussion with Perry Trimper about it, to be honest with you. But I can tell you that Eddie feels the same way I do, for sure.
Yeah. David says, shameful that you guys have to be talking about this. I agree, David. It's it is unfortunate that this is where we find ourselves in a civilized society, in a province, in a democratic country as advanced as Canada, that we have to be actually sitting here and saying that there are irregularities in an election, and that could make the election somewhat invalidated or something. I mean, this isn't stuff that's supposed to be happening in this part of the world. be honest with you.
No, it's what you would expect in some banana republic, to be
Right.
frank.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what where we're to. And
Yeah.
the sad thing about it is that the house is going to open now, and I make no apologize. I make no apologies for the fact. I'll say this up front, that I intend on bringing this matter up, and I'm not letting it go either at every opportunity. But it's sad. It's sad that I have to do it, particularly when you consider all of the other important issues that need to be dealt with. Whether it be our provincial debt, whether it be the file on rate mitigation, which nobody's talking about that one. That's a huge one. I mean,
and the thing about it is, Paul, Rudy, that the government now, when you stand up with this issue in the House of Assembly, the government will accuse you of not focusing on the real issues of the province and focusing on something that's done.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's going to happen. You're absolutely right, Graydon. These are the political games that get played, and you're absolutely right. They're going to say that there's more important things to do. They're also going to probably say you're grandstanding. I think one time in the last session there, Chess Crosby accused myself and Eddie Joyce of a publicity stunt. Because we had a setting of the House of Assembly, and they were going to deny us opportunities to speak and to ask questions. And we said, okay, fine, we'll find other ways. And we did, to raise issues that our constituents wanted us to raise. And for that, they said it was a publicity stunt. So, look, I've been around the horn now a number of times. I know all the political games. They can say what they want. They can't hurt me. I really don't care less what they say. I'm going to do what I think is right. And in this particular case, with this election, I am not letting this go. And I will be demanding accountability from the chief electoral officer. He's answerable to the House. He has to explain how all this went down. He has to explain all these irregularities. And because we need to have confidence. We need to have confidence. And right now, my confidence level is at about 0.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Warwick says we don't need an investigation. We know what happened. We need to make changes so things like this don't happen. So, I mean, Paul, obviously you're going to be bringing these issues to the forefront. I mean, are you going to try and spearhead the initiative now to change the Elections Act to ensure that this doesn't happen again?
Well, obviously, the part of ensuring that it's not going to happen again. Obviously, I'm going to support a new Elections Act or amended Elections Act, but the reality of that is that the Elections Act is legislation, and legislation can only be brought to the House of Assembly by the government. So Premier Fury has put in the mandate letter of the Minister of Justice, the new Minister of Justice, that he wants a new Elections Act, an amended Elections Act, whatever. So that's what he's supposed to be doing. I imagine at some point in time in the next year or two or whatever, it'll come before the House of Assembly. And if the changes make sense, I will absolutely support it. That's not happening overnight. That's going to take time. But what I'm talking about, the other piece that I'm talking about is forget the court action, forget the new Elections Act. We have an officer of the House of Assembly who has acted inappropriately based on all the allegations, and that is what needs to be investigated, because you can't hang someone out to dry. You can't hold somebody accountable for rumors and speculation. No. You have to confirm it happened. So we can't. I can't hold Mr. Chalk accountable for staff, for example, taking ballot boxes home just because the president of the NDP party said on a CBC interview that some anonymous person told him that it happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I mean by it has to be investigated to confirm exactly what happened, what decisions were made, why they were made, how they were made, if they were indeed in contravention of the act or not. And once we have all those facts, if there was anything if there was anything done not appropriate, then Mr. Chalk, in this case, has to be held accountable. He reports to the House, and he has to be accountable to the House.
Yeah.
And that's not because of Mr. Chalk. I would do the same thing if it was the Auditor General did something wrong, or if it was the Privacy Commissioner. It doesn't matter. They're officers of the House. They report to the House of Assembly.
Yeah.
And I would be neglecting my duty if I were to simply let it go and say, "Oh well, what happened happened. Let sleeping dogs lie, and let's do better next time." Yeah. How can people have confidence in that?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think we're going to end it there, guys. I thank you all for the comments and everything, Terry. But I don't know what you're talking about with Jesuits, but anyway, we'll leave that where it's to for tonight. Paul, I appreciate your time. Honest to goodness, man, what are you getting off with the Jesuits? Come on.
We'll leave that
one. Get that looked after, Terry boy. So listen, I appreciate your time, Paul. This has been an excellent conversation, and you've been very kind with your time and good insight. Nothing but the best of luck to you, sir. To be honest with you, a lot of us are counting on you. And so hopefully when the House opens and things get going here, we're going to be hearing your voice as much as they can, and hopefully we can see some changes that are greatly needed in this province, because I mean this place is too beautiful to let it die now.
Absolutely. We're living in the best place in the world. There's no doubt about that. And we have so much potential. When you look at the resources and everything we have, we should be sitting pretty with what we got. But unfortunately, for any number of reasons, it's been mismanaged over the years. We find ourselves in a mess. I think we need to dig ourselves out of this mess, and I'm willing certainly to be part of that. But we also need, I think, for people to have confidence in their government and in their members, and to be upfront and honest with the people. And that's what I've adopted. That's what I've tried to do as best I can. And hopefully that will become the mantra of government on a go-forward basis. We'll wait and see.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you all, and let's tune in next week for all of you who have tuned in. If you're watching this live, or if you're watching this a little bit later, we do this live every Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. And we'll be back here next week. Not sure who's going to be joining us, but we'll let you know. Keep watching our Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff, and we'll make that announcement. Paul, Graydon, you guys have a great night, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Take care.
Good night, guys.
Don't stub your toe now going out in the dark, Paul.
I'll try not to.
Okay. All right, guys. Have a good one.
All the best.